Greetings and welcome to our daily walk through the scripture for August the 29th. Your readings today find you in Job chapter 34, 35, and 36, 2 Corinthians chapter 4 verses 1 through 12, Psalm 44 1 through 8, and Proverbs chapter 22 verses 10 through 12. Now, yesterday I kind of talked about Elihu a little bit and the speech that he brings. Remember, he's the fourth friend that has been sitting at the campfire this time, just kind of listening to the other guys as they give Job a hard time. So then Elihu comes in and he says, I'm young. I know I'm young, but here's what I'm observing. And Elihu's speech is actually different from the other guy's speech, because where the other guys were talking to Job and saying, Job, you must have done something wrong. You've done something wrong, obviously, because of what's going on. That's not what Elihu does. Elihu actually kind of corrects Job a little bit, because if you've been reading this and you look at Job's questions, if you will, it kind of makes it sound like Job is demanding answers from God. They're saying, God, I need answers as to why this is going on. I know you have sovereignty, but I want to know why. And Elihu comes back and he says, you know, Job, maybe you should slow down just a little bit on this. And so in chapter 33, you're reading yesterday, Elihu kind of rebukes Job for demanding an audience with God. And the reason why he is saying that is because, look, Job, is God just or is God not just? To which Job would answer, God is just. So Elihu says, well, if God is just, then why do you need answers? Don't you know that whatever's going on is because God is just? In other words, you don't have to ask God, because he's going to make right decisions and he's going to make right responses. And so you don't necessarily need to do that. Then in chapter 34, he kind of helps rebuke for God's justice, that God will eventually pay man back for the decisions that are made. And he kind of pushes Job a little bit and says, man, you're almost sinning. You got to be careful about this. Then in chapter 35, Elihu talks about that Job makes a statement in chapter 35 of, hey, Elihu makes a statement in chapter 35 telling Job that, hey, it's not useless to do good. While God is not affected by our righteousness or our wickedness, he doesn't have to respond in the timeline that we think he should. Meaning that God is going to do what God is going to do. And so that brings us then to chapter 36, when God does indeed reward the righteous and punish the wicked. He does use these afflictions for instruction and punishment. But Elihu warns Job, don't let your affliction turn into bitterness. And then he goes into a beautiful story about rain falling on the wicked and the righteous alike, and God commanding creation for correction and loving kindness, and using affliction for greater purpose. So these are important things that we need to pay attention to. And as you finish out chapter 37 tomorrow, you're going to hear more of Elihu's expansion of this. And then we hear from God. But now let's go over to 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 1 through 12, because talking about afflictions, talking about things that are there, one of the things that we have to remember as followers of Christ is that we are valuable to God. We have been adopted as heirs and co-heirs. And so no matter what kind of difficulties we face, we have to understand that we are considered valuable treasure. That's why Paul uses the analogy of jars of clay. Now, we might think of that as, that's a weird analogy, right? I mean, come on, jars of clay, they're fragile, they're breakable. They are, but during the time of Paul, jars of clay were used to house and care for things that were of value. And so you took care of the jars of clay because they had things that contained value. This is one of the reasons that we actually got the Dead Sea Scrolls in the 1940s, is because somebody had taken time to place these items into jars of clay. So we need to remember and be reminded that even when we face persecution, even when we feel like we're afflicted or abandoned, we are not any of these things. And that's what Paul reminds us of in 2 Corinthians 4, starting in verse 7. So I'm going to use this to close it out, to read and remind us of how valuable we are for God and how valuable God sees us. But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. In other words, God has given us incredible power, but it's not our powers, it's his power. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be manifested in our bodies. For we who live are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, so that the life of Jesus may also be manifested in our mortal flesh. In other words, we are considered valuable by God, and we are, as a result of this, to go and show people the value of God. Make sense? All right. Have a blessed day. We'll talk more next time.